So in honor of Final Fantasy VII coming out on Switch, I wanted to take a look at and review the ports for the game, in the same vein as what I did for Final Fantasy IX. The versions you should hold for consideration if you are planning to play the game are the original PlayStation version, the current PC version, the PS4 version, or the Switch and Xbox versions. Once again, changes that are made in one version will go on to the next version unless stated otherwise, meaning any changes that came into the PC version are applied to the PS4 version and so on to the Switch and Xbox version, since all of the ports build off of each other. It's a pretty different situation from Final Fantasy IX, and I would argue that the later ports of Final Fantasy VII actually hold up and are worth playing over the original. Of course, once again, there is probably no wrong way to play Final Fantasy VII as long as you enjoy it. So with that all out of the way, let's get started. And we'll start with the Japanese release of Final Fantasy VII back in 1997. And you probably never played this version. The version of Final Fantasy VII that we got here in the West and in Europe are very different from the original Japanese release. For example, indicators were added, the encounter rate was lowered, super bosses were added, a new dungeon was added, the clock puzzle was simplified, and there were bug fixes. And of course, another difference is that the Western version is in English. And apparently the localization was primarily handled by one person, which led to a lot of mistakes. As you would expect from a PlayStation game, this game still looks great if you were to play it on a CRT now, especially the backgrounds. FF7 is another game that features dithering, which is this checkerboard-like pattern you can see, which is used to bring out more details on a CRT. It has a myriad of other purposes too, but on a pixel-perfect screen like today's monitors and TVs, the screen won't look as good. Coupled with your TV's processing upscaling, there may be issues on how this game looks. The game is 240p, it has 60 FPS menus, 30 FPS in the field, and 15 FPS in battle except for the battle UI. The battle UI is 60. Yeah, the top portion of the screen is actually 15 FPS, but the battle menus are still 60 FPS. FF7 isn't difficult, but if you do want to max out materia, you will have to grind, which can be a bit of a monotonous process in this version of the game. And load times weren't the best either for the original version. So when you compare the version of Final Fantasy VII we got to the original Final Fantasy VII released in Japan, it almost feels like it was unfinished. So that's why the game was re-released in Japan known as Final Fantasy VII International. And this version also came with a 4th bonus disc that included some background information about the game. Ultimately, I'd say if you wanted the original experience of Final Fantasy VII, you gotta go with the PlayStation version. Just keep in mind though, you're dealing with a worse translation and more bugs. And now we get to start the long journey of the PC port of FF7, and we begin our tale in 1998. Eidos had started building this version of the game off of an unfinished build of the Japanese version. So when this version shipped, it had featured bugs that were not in the original PlayStation version because they had already been debugged at that time. The PC version also featured a MIDI soundtrack since, you didn't have the PlayStation sound font on your PC. The FMVs are also a lower resolution than the PlayStation ones. This version of the game gave characters mouths for some reason, which apparently all of them already had mouths, they were just disabled. But on top of that, a lot of characters don't blink correctly. This blinking issue you're seeing where they're basically winking, this is in every single version of the game after this. They never fix this. In fact, in the later versions, they remove the mouths again, but the mouths come back for a frame when characters quote-unquote blink or wink. And there were localization corrections made. So then in 2012, the PC version was actually re-released, and this time it used an updated fan-made rendering engine known as Ali's Driver, which enabled the game to go up to 1080p. So the frame rates in this version are 60 FPS menus, 30 FPS field, and 15 in battle, including the battle UI. The battle UI is no longer its own frame rate. There were more localization corrections made, more bug fixes, cloud saving was added, achievements were added, and the MIDI soundtracks are now OGG files, but still not the original versions on the PlayStation. The FMVs were fixed though and are now higher quality. There were also new shaders that could be applied to the 3D models, and this version allowed for boosters in the weirdest possible way. It allowed you to max out your HP, MP, and Gil, but it had to be applied permanently to a save file that was uploaded to the cloud, and you would have to apply the boosters through Square Enix's website. Now, as you'd imagine, the PC version has plenty of mods. Now, don't worry, I'm not going to go into a lot of details, I'm just going to lay on the table what's out there. For example, an AI enhanced background mod, and a mod that is a full-fledged relocalization of the entire game. And then this re-release that was in 2012 was also put on Steam in 2013. And then later on, after being released on Steam, there was a patch that added the original PlayStation music to both the Steam version and the Square Enix Store version. The tale doesn't stop there though, there was actually some changes made to the Japanese version of the PC release. So in the Japanese version, encounters can actually be disabled and there was a speed up function, features that we wouldn't see in the West until later. So then with the current version of the PC version that you could buy, I think you're getting a lot worth it that puts it over the original version of the game, with localization corrections and bug fixes, the higher quality FMVs, and mod support. But I gotta be honest, the mouths look really dumb. You may want to find a mod that disables them, that's all I'm saying. So if you want those benefits, I would say go for the PC version. But all of these benefits and more are a part of the 8th gen console re-releases of the game, so in a minute we're gonna take a look at those. Next up is the mobile port of Final Fantasy VII, released on iOS in 2015 and Android in 2016, and this port is based off of the PC version. I don't recommend this version, but it does have features that we will see in later ports of the game. But remember, the future versions are not based on the mobile port, so don't worry about that. So just remember that, your mileage may vary with the performance of this port. Reviews for this version cite many crashes and lack of stability, so the mobile port featured autosaves, running by default, the option to disable random encounters but no speed up function just yet, mouths were removed, and max stat boosters don't require a website anymore, they are just instant. Now here's something to give you an idea of the quality of this port. So on the Android page's description, where you would go to buy the game, you can read it says, "Depending on the terrain and timing of the action, the buggy, submarines, airships, and other modes of transportation may cease to move when the player embarks or disembarks. Currently, the only fix is to restart the game from a data file saved before the bug occurred." I had also read in the reviews that people were not able to unlock Vincent in the game because you have to unlock the safe using touchpad controls, and that's just, it's really sad, but it's really funny. Now thankfully, the mobile version didn't make any changes to the UI, and instead, it just has virtual touch controls, illustrated through like an overlay over the game. Next up is the PS4 port released in 2015, and thankfully, instead of being based on the mobile port, this version is based on the PC port. And in this version, the backgrounds were, quote-unquote, touched up a little. You can tell there's a difference in them, and personally, I'm not a fan of what they did with them. And the font was also upscaled and filtered. Field screens are now centered, and this version only uses the updated PC shaders. More analog movement, which only means that if you tilt the stick, you will walk, and if you hold it all the way down, you will run. This does not mean you can run in any direction freely. Some temporary enhancements were also added, so with the touch of L3, R3, or both together at the same time, you could increase the movement speed by 3, restore HP, MP, and limit, or disable random encounters. Now I have no idea how or why Square keeps screwing this up, but on this version of Final Fantasy VII, the world or field music resets after a random encounter. So just be ready to hear the beginning of that field theme music over and over again. The Switch port of Final Fantasy VII is based off the PS4 port. It has the same blurry backgrounds, font, faux analog, and enhancements. From what I can tell, the game is not 1080p, but it's not 720 either, and it also looks really good on dock, so if undocked is your method of play, you're good. And I'll be honest, because of how the PS4 already blurred the backgrounds, I don't think the resolution is as big of a deal here. And honestly, this port is incredibly competent compared to the other ones, at least if you consider the PS4 port to be fine. I only really noticed a few minute quirks about the Switch version, but only one of those is worth bringing up. For a split second at the end of FMVs that transition into gameplay, the game will go black for just a few frames. Now I've actually been seeing a lot of people ask if you can stretch the game to widescreen. No. At the very least though, at least the sides are blank and doesn't have an annoying border like Final Fantasy IX does. Alright, now I don't have an Xbox, but Xbox people shouldn't worry much about this one. I made sure to do my research on it as well. It is definitely very identical to the PS4 port. One thing that is oddly different though, is that the Xbox has similar FMV issues to the Switch version. During the transition from FMV to gameplay for certain FMVs, the NPCs will disappear for a second. And then honestly, that's it, another competent version. And on that note, we have successfully laid out all of the versions of FF7 you could possibly want to play. Be it you want the original experience, you want mods, or you just have a platform of choice you want to play it on. If you have any other thoughts or experiences with any of the ports of this game, let me know in the comments. Now honestly, these kinds of videos are actually really exhausting to make, so I don't know if I'll do like another port comparison for any other game or anything like that. But hey, never say never. So, until next time, thank you for watching.